Thank you so much, and for your kindness and patience to answer them in the chat if you still can.
Sure.
And hope to see you once again. So now we'll move with our schedule to Alen. So we are proud to present also one guest from Swiss community, and this is Alen Arslanagic, CEO at Visium and Forbes 30 Under 30. Alen, hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Alen. So your presentation is 2020 is the decade of self-driving cars, but let's start with a few words about you and about Visium. And I trust it will be super fantastic to share your story with participants and then follow up with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. So to give you a bit of background about myself, I basically, as soon as I finished my studies in innovation and entrepreneurship at Imperial College London, I took the opportunity of launching Visium. In the past, I had the experience of launching other companies, but I was really excited about this opportunity in AI because I realized together with my friend Timon how fast the field was advancing, and at the same time how traditional companies were struggling both to keep the pace and to capture the value that there was in AI. So we started off on this mission of helping these companies first identify what's possible to do, then demonstrate the value with pilots, then scaling these pilots globally in production, but also to establish internal capabilities. Ultimately, our mission is really to democratize AI. So we want to build products that can enable us to make them also more accessible to also small and medium companies. That's to give you a bit of background about Visium. And yeah, so as you said, today I will be speaking to you about self-driving cars. As you may know, the main techniques are taken from artificial intelligence, more precisely computer vision. And we have lots of experience in these types of projects. It's one of the most flourishing fields, and we'll see more concretely over the couple of slides I will share with you where we are today and where we're headed. So if you'd like, I can share my screen.
And thank you for these few words. And now we are keen to see your presentation. Yes, we can see it, Alen.
Perfect. So first of all, concretely, what are the capabilities of autonomous vehicles? The main tasks that these vehicles have to continuously execute are four. So first, predictions, predicting, for example, the trajectory of a pedestrian, of a car, or of a bicycle. Then it's about segmenting the visual fields in different classes of objects, such as, for example, differentiating between the road and traffic signs and pedestrians, understanding that these are different things. Then it's about applying pattern recognition algorithms. So being able to identify what is the specific object. So classifying the object in its correct class, for example, cars or traffic signs again. And then based on all of this information, of course, they need to analyze it and interact with dynamically with the environment and choose what to do next. So all these aspects of decision making. So what is bringing us today these capabilities? If we take a look at these two examples, first of all, we have seen massive improvement in computer vision. So computer vision, as I was hinting before, is the field of AI that applied on image and video data. And here you can see from the ImageNet challenge, which is a challenge which challenges groups of engineers around the world to apply their techniques, their architecture on a data set of 1 million images and to see how accurately they can classify 20,000 different objects into this data set. And at the beginning of the last decade, we had an error of about 30%. Therefore, it was not very useful in any types of application in the industry. However, in only 7 years, that dropped to 3%. And the human performance zone is at about 5, 6, 7%. Therefore, computers in this specific task are already superhuman. On the other hand, if we look, for example, at the computing power, In the year 2000, a supercomputer with 1 teraflop of computing power, so 1 trillion operations per second, required a room of 150 square meters, and it cost 46 million. Only 16 years later, 8 times the same computing capacity costs $600. And that's a cost decrease per computing, for the same computing power of 650,000, which is quite crazy. Now, if we go back to self-driving cars, first of all, what are the hardware components that make these cars? So on one side, we have the sensor fleet, which are acquiring the data about the environment around the car. And on the other hand, we have a computing unit which processes all of this data and then applies the different algorithms. If we look more specifically at the main types of sensors that are being used, so we have cameras, radars, ultrasonic sensors, and LiDAR. So in case of cameras, it's quite straightforward, as you can imagine. I added here an image of a picture that's been treated with a specific exposure, just to remind ourselves that computers have the advantage over us to be able to apply any sorts of filters and exposures to the images if that helps them to perceive better the environment around them. The second one is radar, and radar complements well cameras because radar, as it plays on radio waves, it works very well also in very dark environment or if there is bad weather. Then we have ultrasonic sensors. These are very good at giving the car a perception, a 360-degree perception in close proximity, most often used for parking. And then we have LiDAR. And LiDAR is a sensor that pulsates thousands of lasers. And by measuring the reflection of these lasers in the environment around, it can then infer the distance of the different objects, hence creating a 3D world which is very high definition of itself. So there are two main approaches to reach full self-driving. The first one, which relies primarily on vision sensors and advanced artificial intelligence. So this takes first and foremost cameras. The process of doing this is by dissecting what does it mean a full self-driving, what are all the capabilities involved to allow a car to become fully autonomous. And so by then taking one task at a time and then increasing the accuracy by covering all of the potential edge cases, that's the approach. So for example, one of such tasks is to detect accurately traffic lights and know if they apply or not to the car that's in question. So the rationale of taking this approach is that we as humans drive based on our eye field, so we do not need fancy 3D maps to be able to orient ourselves. So companies that are using this approach think that also AI can eventually solve all of these tasks, and by also having more cameras, it should be able to achieve a full self-driving capacity. The key difference to the other approach is that this approach is much more versatile thanks to machine learning, because there are massive amounts of data and the machine learning can be applied quite well, and deep learning more specifically. This enables, for example, to generalize quite well at scale. And so it doesn't require, after showing enough examples, for example, as we said before, of detecting traffic lights and whether they apply or not, then in a new situation that the car has never encountered, it can still do the task well. Another thing is that neural networks identify what's being detected more easily. So not only knowing that there is an object, but also knowing what is that object. And if you compare it to a 3D environment that the LiDAR creates, I saw just the other day a picture that Tesla was showing an edge case where in the highway, a car lost a chair and there was literally a chair floating in the highway. So we can imagine this situation can happen. And at the same time, we can imagine a much more common situation where there is a plastic bag floating in the air. And the LiDAR sensor, or one that's a self-driving car that's relying primarily on that, might struggle more to differentiate the degree of danger between these two situations. And so with the camera, it could be easier to do that and avoid braking once the car is at full speed, which could be very dangerous. So if we take now the second approach, as we said earlier, how the LiDAR works and how it can create very, very high definition maps. So these maps are centimeter level resolution. And once these maps are created, then tracks can be defined on which the car drives on. The rationale for this approach is that near perfect accuracy, which is a requirement to approve a self-driving car, it's not enough that the car is right 99% of the time, otherwise it would be not very useful, cannot be met with a system based primarily on cameras. And so another aspect worth mentioning as a key difference is that reaching a very high accuracy is easier, but it's very limited to the specific use case and the location. So in terms of geography, to scale is very resource intensive. Surprisingly enough, only Tesla is going ahead with the primarily vision sensors approach. And to compare a bit the pros and cons, as we mentioned before, we have the scalability and the cost. We will see more in details later, but it costs more or less 10 times more just in terms of hardware to have the LiDAR. And then as well, in terms of scaling in geography, it's a tremendous amount of work. In terms of cons for the vision sensors approach is that the accuracy and therefore the safety requires huge amounts of data. And very few companies can even hope to acquire such amounts of data in a time frame that's viable. On the other hand, the pros of the LiDAR system is that it's very explainable. If the system fails, it's much easier to understand why it failed. We mentioned it's faster to get accurate, but in a very specific geographic location. And then as the cons, besides being expensive, it doesn't work at all in bad weather. As you can imagine, laser pulsating in the rain, it's not going to work. So if we now take the example of Tesla Model 3 sensors suite to give you a more concrete idea, we have a total of 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, and 1 forward-facing radar for a total of 21 sensors. There are 3 cameras looking ahead with different degrees of openness that complement each other. We have 4 side cameras and we have 1 rear camera. The total cost is not available online, but I would estimate is about $3,000. And then comparing this to Waymo, we have less sensors in total, but at the same time, it's more heavily equipped because these sensors are quite bulky and they're also very expensive. So 4 LiDARs unit, 2 forward-facing camera, 4 side cameras, 1 rear camera, 2 side-facing radars, 1 360-degree vision system on top, and just the cost of the LiDAR alone is of $30,000, which doesn't make it really an affordable car. If you can imagine, I would guess that Tesla didn't really have this option if it wanted to achieve self-driving cars at scale, and this might hint why they also choose to try the other way. So the main challenges of achieving full self-driving capabilities are 3. So achieving the safety, the level of safety required for these cars to be allowed to drive on the road without a human continuously monitoring if they are doing the right things. The fact that it has to be affordable, and the fact that it has to be practical. So for safety, it's really about getting that near perfect accuracy. And given the edge cases, it's very hard to cover all potential scenarios. And today, machine learning is not nearly as good as humans at generalizing in all situations. And so a stop sign that might be, as we'll see a concrete example later, put on a wall, it might be much harder for the system to understand if it applies or if it doesn't apply and recognize it. So it's really about finding all of these edge cases and then making the system robust enough. In terms of affordability, we mentioned earlier, the LiDAR system per unit, they cost before $75,000. Google decided to internalize the production for its Waymo division, and they lowered that cost to $7,500. But it still makes it incredibly expensive for a single car, especially if you can imagine that if you want to map on a global scale, every road, it's going to take insane amounts of cars to do that. And then practicality, which comes at a trade-off with safety. So you don't want a car that can drive up to maximum 30 kilometers per hour, because that's not very difficult to have a car that's slow and that's completely safe. You need a system that also does not have many false positive, which more concretely in the case of Uber that you see the illustration on the right, Uber had too many false positives, and in the case was about the car was detecting a danger situation where it wanted to brake more often than it was necessary, to the point that it was just not very practical. And so they decided to hard code a way to kind of loosen up this and make it react less. But this cost a life to a pedestrian recently. In fact, I think the car detected the pedestrian 6 seconds before reaching it, but it didn't notify the driver. And it just moved forward. It was uncertain. It didn't know it was a pedestrian, and it didn't predict well the trajectory it would take until it was too late. Another thing is that there you can see the picture. The driver was also feeling perhaps that the self-driving car was too capable and was not paying attention, which also, of course, contributed to this tragedy to happen. Now, if we talk about safety and the long tail of events, so all of these edge cases, even a relatively simple task of detecting a stop sign comes with incredible variation. So the stop sign can be very unique on a pole, with lights on the wall, temporary, but they can also be occluded by a car, by foliage, by another sign, and so forth. And I think another example, which for me it's even more impressive, it's the fact that they can be conditional, and they can be conditional whether the barrier is up or down, or the gate is closed. They can be conditional if the human raises it in the air, or, and this is probably the most difficult one, the last one on the bottom right, they are conditional if the car turns on the left. And there is quite complex processes there for the car to learn that. And for engineers at Tesla and other companies, they need to have enough example of this to teach the car every time a specific case. And to find this data is very difficult, as you can imagine, as there are not so many instances of this that are happening. So that's one of the challenges. In terms of scalability, at the end, it's all about data. Tesla has insane capabilities of autopilot, but this is predominantly the case for the US. If we look at the sales number they have, I could estimate that 65% of the data comes from the US. And to reach robustness, because there is so much variations, as you can see from the images from roads in Switzerland or roads in the US or in other countries, you need really enough data. So that's something to keep in mind. But then if we compare how our company is doing in acquiring data, we can see Tesla has quite a significant advantage in this case compared to Waymo, where it's present in 50 countries. It has over 5 billion kilometers on autopilot. It has a fleet of 650,000 cars on advanced hardware, and this is bringing them 1 billion kilometers every month. So on the other hand, Waymo, which is the robotaxi service and self-driving cars offered by Google, is present in 25 cities. It has 40 million kilometers of data. 100% of the data comes from the US. They have a fleet of 600 cars, and these are acquiring not even 0.2% of the amount of the distance that Tesla cars are driving. So another thing that's interesting to point out is that recently was published a paper which showed that near LiDAR accuracy for 3D mapping can be achieved based on camera and machine learning. So that's also interesting to point out when we want to think whether the camera approach that Tesla is having is really viable or not. So if we look at where do we stand now, here we have the definitions of the different levels of self-driving capabilities. And so it goes from feet off to hands off to eyes off to attention off and to being fully driverless, which is level 5. Anything beyond level 3, there is a very difficult question that comes up, which is who's responsible for it? And so I think this is what holds back the most self-driving going forward, for good or for bad. But this is something to really keep in mind, because at the end it's relative. Maybe cars today are capable of level 3 or level 4, but they are, because of regulations, they are still level 2. And indeed, if we look a bit at the players in the market, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but you can see that most players are between level 1 and level 2. And we have Waymo, which can be considered level 4, level 5. But there is a caveat to that, because that level 4.5 that they have is only available in one city in the US, in Phoenix, Arizona. So everything is relative. Is Waymo really there? Is it ahead of the game? I would not say so, but there are different approaches to saying this. If we look on the other hand at the capability of Tesla today, and if you can see here the Tesla Navigate features, which has also been released at the same time that Waymo Robotaxi service has been released in 2018, it enables Tesla drivers to get in the car, decide the location, and the car does everything else. If you take a look on YouTube at the full video, you will really see the capabilities are quite impressive. Of course, it doesn't mean that it can now do this everywhere in the US. There are probably still enough situations of risks where the system is not robust enough. But at the end of the day, now Tesla has to demonstrate with enough data that its system is more safer than human driving. So based on that, eventually they might hope to get regulatory approval. As soon as they get 20, 30 times safer than human driving, they might be approved like Google, and then they might scale much faster. On the other hand, I found a video about Renault, which was claiming that they have the most advanced self-driving car and that it was level 4. And here you can see how the driver goes as far as putting a headset and being projected in other environments. So I think it's important here to still consider that this is a concept car. As they say in the video, it's one in the entire world. And as you can mention, at some point, there is a passenger who has full control of the car. Basically, he has all of the controls and he has the hands very close in case something happens. So the difference between this car and Tesla is none. And therefore, I would argue it's not level 4, really, it's still level 2. And because Renault doesn't unfortunately have the same data that Tesla has, it's probably unlikely that their system is anywhere near to be as robust as Tesla capability. And also here you can see that the demonstration is fully on the highway, which is a relatively easy environment compared to everything that can happen in an urban area. So what lies ahead? I think that accident-proof self-driving cars are unlikely for the next at least 2 decades. We would have to see mostly self-driving cars around for the accident to really get to very, very minimal numbers. And therefore, it's all about relative safety. How much safer than human in order to be able to be approved? Today, Tesla claims it's 9 times safer than humans. But I would doubt that as well, because it's a bit cherry-picked and might be a bit misleading. However, considering the incredible exponential improvements that AI can deliver, we might get to anywhere maybe around 20 or 30 times safer in already as shortly as 2-3 years. And the potential lives that can be saved in the US with such a system are more than 30,000. So level 4 and level 5 on the road are completely dependent on regulation, and there lies the most uncertainty. It might come in a couple of years, it might come in a decade or more. I believe that countrywide regulation could be reached by end of 2022. However, it will take several years for all European companies to start seeing a comparable level of self-driving performance for the reasons we mentioned before. So another example, actually, from my personal experience of driving a Tesla in Switzerland, is that Tesla Autopilot struggles really to handle roundabouts in Switzerland. I think that probably Tesla's engineers are now coping with much harder challenges close to home. And therefore, this is one of the illustrations that I can share with you on why it will take time for them to then tackle the different country-specific challenges in order for the system to be safe enough and to be approved in European countries. So the key takeaways is that achieving level 5 self-driving capabilities depend on the definition, and the definition is very relative. Is it a system that has the capabilities to be much safer than human, or does it have to be legally approved? Does it have to be countrywide or global? Level 4 is practically achieved by Tesla in the US, I believe, and level 5 is achieved today by Waymo in Phoenix. Tesla might achieve a countrywide level 5 as early as 2023. It's to be expected to start in the US. There are also very good advancements and progress in China. We didn't have the time today to cover all of the, there are 250 companies playing in the field, and China, of course, they are advancing also quite fast in it. And so achieving full self-driving cars is all about data, safety, and regulations. And in my humble opinion is that Tesla seems way ahead of everyone else because of the quantity of the data, but also the quality of the data. They have over 1 billion kilometers driven on the navigate feature. And that's extremely precious data that no one else has at this point and scale. And also there are other reasons which made me believe Tesla as an edge, but we don't have the time today to go over them. I see we're a bit over time already. And therefore I'm very happy to take some questions if we have a few minutes.
Thank you, Alen. This is like a presentation. We unfortunately we don't have time. Now it's 8:11. So, but you shared not only information, but you shared also a lot of learnings, which is very appreciated by our participants and by us as we organize the event. And I strongly believe that we have so many topics to cover together, and that you are a precious member of our community, and for sure we will organize something with you and Visium in the future. So I'm really thankful in the name of whole organization and leadership team. And now I have to close this event, unfortunately. And thank you very much for participating. Now I'll give the spotlight to Alessandro, Biagio, and Diego.